You might be familiar with a Belfast playwright, Mary Jones, who has written some brilliant stage productions. Um, a couple that spring to mind: Stones in His Pockets, which I had seen in London way back, which was brilliant. It's now actually on in the Lyric Theatre again in Belfast, and I'm hoping to get to see that again. And the one I wanted to talk about today was The Blind Fiddler. It tells the story of a young girl, or a girl, who's out in search of truth about her father, who used to mysteriously head off to Loch Derg every year. Loch Derg is a kind of spiritual or penal, a spiritual home or a penal colony for Catholics, Irish Catholics, and he used to go every year, and she has this crisis of, I suppose, searching for who she is and all that. But this is a bit of a spoiler that she finds out anyway that I haven't thought all these years that he would have headed off to Loch Derg. Where he was really going was going up to a trad music festival up in the country, probably Promroy, if I can remember. I'm not too sure, but I do remember when I saw the play in Belfast that Cathal Hayden was playing the fiddle on stage, and the musical interludes were incredible. Cathal Hayden was an Irish fiddle champion. He used to go to school with his brother Jerry. This is the most Irish of all podcasts I think I've ever done. And he was playing in a band called Four Men and a Dog. He was a brilliant musician. Great play anyway. But I was reminded of that when my mother passed away. My mother passed away in 2010. And myself and the brothers were chatting about the old stuff, and I was talking about my recollection of my father. Every September, one of the local guys, a guy called Peter McKerney, would have called up in his car a wee red Austin Morris and would have tooted the horn outside on a Sunday in September, and he would have the two of them would have headed off, or the three of them, maybe four of them, would have headed off down to Croke Park. And all my life I had assumed that they were going to the football final, but my brother told me that it was the hurling final that my father went to every year for quite a few years. I don't know how long, but it was almost like his annual pilgrimage. Maybe his version of Loch Derg. That was the sneeze in the background. It's my dog. So I was really surprised that I didn't know this. I wasn't that surprised I didn't know it, but I was kind of, I always thought my father was into football, and I would have watched the All-Ireland finals when in the late 70s, when it was the Kerry and Dublin games. And I decided in 2010 to go to the hurling final that year, and I think it was the year that Micheál Murray retired, but it was a real stunning hurling match. It was Kilkenny against Tipperary, and I have taken notes because I couldn't remember the score, but I knew that it was a cracker, and Laura Corbett scored 3 goals. Henry Shefflin might have scored a point or something like that, and Tipperary won, which was then alleged to be one of the greatest hurling games of all time. And I'm sure many generations would make that claim. But what dawned on me was, if anybody has ever been to Croke Park to watch the hurling final, the energy in the stadium is ridiculous. It's highly charged. That's an understatement. There must be an adjective to fully describe what it's like, but it's so charged, it's incredible. The action on the pitch is ridiculous. It's just like what you could imagine, the Colosseum and the gladiators, and the clash of the ash, the noise that it makes, and the noise of the puck, and the whack of the slither, and just the intensity of the play and the speed and the passion. It's just remarkable. It's really, really quite something. And I went that year, then 2011, 2012. The following year, Laura Corbett was held scoreless, and Shefflin scored 9 points, and Kilkenny won. And Kilkenny had a run of form in that period where they were probably the best team. I think they were running for 5 in a row, had won 4 in a row, and then lost that one and came back, and there was just a period of dominance. And for anybody who has never been to a hurling match, it's arguably, well, maybe not arguably, probably without question, the best field sport in the world. It's the fastest sport. It's the most skillful. It's, I would say, probably just ridiculously fast-paced. Such skills, eye-ball coordination, and all done by amateurs, and all performed by amateurs. And the reason I'm kind of talking about hurling is because on the weekend just gone, Tyrone lost one of their most famous hurling players of all time, a young fella, Damian Casey, died at the weekend. And I was reminded of when he was captain, and Tyrone had just won a few weeks ago, and he had scored something like 14 points in the final. And Tyrone's not really renowned for its hurling, but Casey would have been renowned as one of the best players ever to come through this county, and probably standing up there with the greats of Kilkenny and Tipperary and all that sort of stuff. He's played 400 games, championship games, and was averaging 10 points a game, you know. And one of the things about this is that Declan Bogue is a brilliant journalist and an incredible sports journalist, but just really some of his writing and Gaelic games is brilliant. And he writes a piece at the weekend in the Irish Examiner that is re-edited for some reason into the Irish Independent, where he talks about Casey and the impact that Casey would have had on the hurling club in Dungannon and the county. And there's real echoes of the passing of Cormac McAnally in 2004, who, you know, I kind of share his surname, but would have watched on as a fan. I didn't know Cormac at all. I maybe met him 3 or 4 times when he was a child, and didn't know him really as the footballer and the man that he had become. But I remember the impact of his death, and not just because of you know, the family connection, but just the impact that it had on Gaelic Tyrone, the wider county, and the Gaelic fraternity on the island of Ireland. And you know, it was a serious impact on those people who knew him, who played with him, who watched him as fans, and obviously not forgetting the impact that it would have had on the family. And right now, whatever's going on with the family must be just horrific, and that loss is just man is irreplaceable on every single level, and a very public death and all that sort of stuff. But it shows that the sporting community, specifically the GAA community, how they come together and how they kind of fall into line and just do what needs to be done to cherish and remember a legacy that was created by these individuals. And in many other sports you could just call them individuals. In hurling, they're probably, you know, they're warriors. You know, they're going into battle with sticks, like with weapons. And whilst it's all fun and games on the sideline, and you can say that these guys are athletes and they're just exceptional. Damian Casey was the most exceptional hurling player and one of the best on the island at his peak. And whether you choose to accept the thin line between myth and fact and our, you know, Irish sagas and folk tales and everything else, hurling has informed our culture from way back, and continues to do so today. And you know, that loss is just something terrible for the family, and probably will take some time to truly sink in for friends and teammates and all that sort of stuff. And you know, his legacy is probably unparalleled, and what you'll look back on moving forward is how brilliant he really was, and that he was a giant of the game. And hopefully there will be a living or a lasting testimonial to him and you know, he what he'd done for hurling in his town in Dungannon and in the county. And it's just this is a real sad day for the sport. But yeah, this is not really related to much to the work that I do. I just thought I'd want to post something on for the day that's in it. I didn't really stick to hurling after that. I never played. I had a signed Henry Shefflin hurl and all that sort of stuff, but I never had a slither in anger. And but it is just a majestic sport, and played at the level Damian Casey was able to play it at. Really, it's just a marvellous thing to behold. It's a real joy to behold. One of the things that I guess I want to finish on is the idea that these guys are role models and athletes are role models. I don't think they are. For every Damian Casey and Cormac McAnallen, I can name a whole bunch of lads who have excelled at sport that I wouldn't let them near my wallet. But that's not a reflection on them or the sport. That's just a mirror on society. And we put an awful lot of pressure on athletes to perform off the field in a way that they perform on the field. And I don't really think that athletes are role models. They can be, and they can choose to be. And there are people like control, like Peter Canavan and Stephen O'Neill, who would be role models, and their impact and influence would be great in that community. And Damian Casey was one of those guys that would have had a really, really strong impact and influence on people, on young kids. And in Declan's article in the Irish Examiner, which is really worth a read, he talks about the trophies that were going to be brought into his club nearby, where he's the assistant manager. And that always happens here. You know, if your team does really well, the county does really well, the trophies then do a tour of the county for a period of time. And GAA is just really ingrained in our culture. And to see a young lad like that was able to carry himself with such dignity on the field and such skill, and then the same off the field, it's a real loss to the family in that. So if you're not really into the hurling, you should check it out. And if you're into the hurling, you probably know what I'm talking about. So thanks for tuning in. On this is my first outside broadcast, but sure, where would you go with a day like that?